Welcome, everyone. We'll wait for a few more seconds as everyone filters in. Okay, good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to CBR Canada's December webinar, Closing the Opportunity Gap for Racialized and Underrepresented Communities through this Community School Initiative. My name is Sarah Switzer, the CBR Canada Programs Coordinator, and I will be moderating the session today, although I won't be doing most of the talking. I feel so fortunate to be sharing the Zoom stage with our panelists today. We'll be presenting on their incredible work with the Community School Initiative in Toronto in partnership with YASI, a nonprofit organization offering affordable and accessible educational programs and services to the Jane and Finch community. This research is supported by Laurier University. I think there are a number of folks from YASI here with us today in the audience, so a warm hello to all. And I'm going to introduce our panelists in a moment. Before we formally begin, I would like to start by inviting us to reflect on the lands that we're on. The CBR Canada Secretariat is situated on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. Many of you may be calling in from different locations, and so I invite you all to introduce yourselves in chat, including where you're calling in from or where your feet are planted, including the territories that you may be on. When doing so, please ensure you change the chat toggle to everyone instead of hosts and panelists. And in the spirit of reconciliation, CBR Canada is committed to engaging with and learning from diverse Indigenous peoples and communities across Canada, as well as addressing the truth and reconciliation calls to action. Last year, as part of our series, we began each webinar by highlighting one of the calls to action from the TRC. We continue this action this year to ensure we're keeping these commitments top of mind. This month, we're highlighting Call to Action 10, an action that resonates strongly with the topic of our webinar today. We call upon the federal government to draft new Indigenous education legislation with the full participation and informed consent of Indigenous peoples. The new legislation would include a commitment to sufficient funding and would incorporate the following principles. 1, providing sufficient funding to close identified educational achievement gaps within one generation. 2, improving educational attainment levels and success rates. 3, developing culturally appropriate curricula. 4, protecting the right to Indigenous languages, including the teaching of Indigenous languages as credit courses. 5, enabling parental and community responsibility, control, and accountability. 6, enabling parents to fully participate in the education of their children. And 7, respecting and honoring treaty relationships. Today, we're going to be hearing from our presenters, and they're going to really speak about the Community School Initiative and larger issues of equity and education. And there's real kind of overlaps and synergies with this particular call to action. Next week on December 16th, during our live discussion, our presenters will join as facilitators, and we will turn the mic over to many of you, our audience, to spark a dialogue about the topics covered today. And I hope we can continue reflecting on these overlaps and interconnections, both today and during our upcoming gatherings. For those of you who may be new to CBR Canada, we are a membership-based organization whose mission is to advance community-based research excellence in Canada by strengthening partnerships, building capacity, mobilizing knowledge, and championing CBR amongst individuals, communities, and institutions. We are a social enterprise funded entirely by our members. Today's event is part 4 of our 8-part series on community-based research in COVID-19, with a focus on addressing widening inequities and, equally important, amplifying community-based visions for change. As part of our programs, we host a number of events, including webinars and live discussions. And today's event is recorded. It'll be hosted online on our website. And if you have any questions at all around tech, please address them to Jana Martin on chat. Today's event will feature a webinar presentation followed with a Q&A at the end. And if you have questions throughout, we ask you to submit them via the Q&A feature, and we'll take them up following the presentation. Last but not least, before I move on to introduce our esteemed panelists, next week we have a follow-up live discussion on December 16th. So we'll gather again and we'll explore the topics discussed today more fully. I'm going to ask Jana to pop the registration link into chat, just in case folks haven't received it or haven't had a chance to register, as well as our link to sign up for our newsletter, so you can be the first to know about our upcoming events. Okay, so let's get started. I have the very, very esteemed pleasure of introducing our panelists today. I'll read out their bios, and Jana is also going to post their bios in chat for us. So Dr. Ardavan Aizadeh is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Education at Wilfrid Laurier University. He's an educator with the Toronto District School Board, author of Decolonizing Educational Assessment, Ontario Elementary Schools, and the EQAO, and editor of Equity as Praxis in Early Childhood Education and Care. He's also co-editing 2 books forthcoming in 2022, titled Counter Narratives of Pain and Suffering as Critical Pedagogy, Disrupting Oppression in Educational Contexts, and the International Handbook of Anti-Discriminatory Education. He is also the co-founder and director of EDI-cation Consulting, offering equity, diversity, and inclusion training to universities. Devon Jones is the founder of Youth Association for Academics, Athletics, and Character Education, otherwise known as YACI, and an educator as well with the Toronto District School Board. Devon is an educator, community developer, and youth advocate, and his work has been highlighted in the Toronto Star, National Post, and the CBC. And his commitment to supporting young people in education has really extended beyond school boundaries and hours, and has inspired thousands of young people. He was given an honorable mention recently in the Toronto Star as the Teacher of the Year. Bryce Bartman is a Canadian South African student in his second year in the Masters of Teaching program at the University of Toronto. His BA in sociology is from Ryerson University, and he has a college certificate in pre-health sciences from George Brown College. He's been working and volunteering with children and youth in under-resourced communities for over a decade through a variety of different initiatives. Sally Abdiab is a Palestinian Canadian who recently completed her Master of Science at the Rehabilitation Sciences Institute and a Bachelor of Science in Mental Health Studies at the University of Toronto. Currently, Sally is doing her Master's of Social Work at the University of Toronto. She has experience working with a wide number of organizations as well at various levels in both nonprofit and governmental sectors. So a warm, warm welcome to all of our presenters. We are very, very fortunate to have them with us, and they're really going to shine a spotlight today on larger issues of equity, education, and COVID-19. So bear with me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can spotlight and shine a light on our fabulous presenters. All right, over to you, Ardavan.
All right. Well, thank you so much for holding this space for us to share and engage in some of these important conversations. And I'll pass it on to Sally, who's going to get us started.
Yes, thanks, Sarah, for your warm introductions. We're so excited to be here with you all and share with you the outcome of this SSHRC-funded project, where we looked at closing the opportunity gap for racialized and under-resourced communities through the Community School Initiative. Our presentation will first cover some fundamental information and background slides, and then with that, we'll move on to discussing our research project. Sarah's already given us a warm introduction, so I'd just like to thank additionally our 4 Bachelors of Education students from Laurier for their help, as well as the youth, parents, and Spirit of Math staff for their engagement during our research team meetings and consultations.
All right, so you might ask yourself, what is the Community School Initiative? I'm going to post a link into the chat where we have created a blog and a website to pretty much update the community as we go along. It's not just about research findings, it's also about connecting various stakeholders with resources. So what the Community School Initiative is concisely, it's a partnership between a nonprofit youth association for academics, athletics, and character education, founded by Devon Jones in 2007. a for-profit entity, Spirit of Math, and as a collective, this partnership is offering extracurricular supplementary programs focusing on math curriculum outside of school hours in the evenings and on weekends. Particularly, we targeted this project grades 2 to 8, and people who are supporting the program are parents, Ontario certified teachers, coaches, and Spirit of Math staff. And the whole idea is around the concept of closing the opportunity gap, making opportunities accessible and affordable, particularly for racialized and under-resourced communities. As we know, in all the sectors in education, justice, and health, they are faced with greater systemic barriers. So just to kind of go a little bit more detail in terms of why this is important in the education sector, looking at achievement levels across all the different grades, we see particularly Black students underachieving. Now, this can be interpreted from a deficit lens, which has happened in many cases, blaming people or communities, when we know the root cause of these issues are systemic barriers, such as the intersection of racism and poverty, amongst many other things, lack of cultural representations, lack of diversity in the teacher workforce, aligning with the cultural identity of students. I'll pass it on to Devon, who can speak a little bit more about this as well.
Yeah, so in looking at the existing data that spoke to Black student achievement, and this is pre-COVID. You know, we had some concerns just based on how Black students were represented across the board as it relates to underachievement, and we wanted to put infrastructure in place that was able to address that gap in achievement and that gap in opportunity. So we felt that it was prudent to address achievement and engagement outside after standardized school hours. So I'll even be that, like Ardavan alluded to earlier, evenings and weekends. And math was something that resonated with us, because when you look at this graphic, you'll see that only 18% of Black students at the grade 9 level were achieving at the provincial standard. So that really concerned us, and we managed to forge a relationship with an incredible partner in Spirit of Math, who attributed a lot of time, personnel, staff, and resource and curriculum expertise in helping us addressing these gaps in achievement and putting the programs in place that will do so.
Great, thank you. And I put the links to both the YACE website and the Spirit of Math website, so you can learn a little bit more about them and how they do and deliver the program. But the Community School Initiative, is a partnership which is bringing the best practices from both organizations with that specific goal of trying to mitigate this existing achievement gap across all the grades, but particularly in the early years, starting out with the grade 2s in the program, all the way to when students are entering high school.
Okay, thanks team. So as many of us know, the pandemic significantly impacted the delivery of education and community-based programs and caused widespread disruptions, especially in neighborhood improvement areas like Jane and Finch, where YACE serves. So our research partnership was guided by the primary objectives and methods of data collection that you can see on the screen. This included literature review, guided by themes and big ideas that we'll discuss later in the presentation, a focus group with educators working in the Community School Initiative, and also online surveys with students and teachers at YACE. So through our data collection, we were able to identify effective pedagogical strategies for both in-person and remote learning, as well as hybrid, and further identify the barriers to access and engagement that the YACE programs faced as they were forced to pivot online and in hybrid models back and forth between the two. The more we understand the barriers and potential long-term impacts, the better we can strategize ways to step in and provide the proper supports for the diverse needs of students in these areas. And we're going to go into more details about our findings after a brief overview of the history of Jane and Finch and EAs.
All right, so to really understand these terms we're using, such as racialized, under-resourced communities, we really have to take a look at the development of this space and how do we get here where there is this achievement gap, where there is this lack of access to opportunities. So this is a history in a nutshell. I mean, we can go much more detail, but just to ground us a little bit, right? Going back to 1954, we see in Ontario, there was an investment really to build more affordable housing. This is something that's still a concern, of course, in 2021. But at that time, housing was invested in and they were being built at a rapid rate, particularly apartments and high-rise apartments, right? The 2005, the City of Toronto identified 13 priority neighborhoods, right? Jane and Finch was one of them. You know, lots of activism and voice from the community. You know, we know that the labeling of an at-risk or a priority neighborhood is from deficit thinking. So in 2014, the city renamed the program from a strength-based lens, calling it neighborhood improvement areas, trying to allocate more resource and funding to create those opportunities, programs, and services to benefit those communities, right? But the problem here, kind of looking at it from a historical lens, was this linear style of hollow urban planning where you're just building spaces for housing without thinking about the relationships, or without thinking about what does a community need to be cultivated to thrive, right? How do we build spaces that value relationships? So from 1961 to 1971, there was 21 high-rise apartments built in the Jane and Finch community, where the population went from 1,300 to 33,000. So think about if we don't actually add services, programs, now the overcrowdedness actually creates competition. And those who don't get access to those opportunities are going to have to invest or try to find alternative ways to support their family. And for some, it's simply a matter of survival and making sure the children are fed, right? So it's a highly dense populated area, and it goes back to the urban planning or lack of it over the years. If you're a visual learner, and this is hard to believe, this was Finch Street and Jane Street in 1957. All right, it's really not that long ago. And here is how, you know, now we consider Jane and Finch an inner city, but it was actually started out as a suburb where people were moving further and further outside of the key areas in Toronto. All right. I'll pass it on to Devon to give you a little bit more about the demographics of the neighborhood.
Thanks, Ardivan. So in 2013, a colleague and I wrote a document for the Department of Justice looking at crime in Jane and Finch, reintegration, incarceration, etc. And we took the liberty of interpreting demographic data that looked at a number of factors. You know, some of those factors were unemployment rate, median income. We looked at the schools in the area, and we looked at where they were on different metrics. For example, where were they on the Learning Opportunity Index, and where were they on the Fraser Report? And we found out, we realized that almost all the schools were high as it relates to attrition and as it relates to achievement. The students were poorly achieving. So at that point, we started looking at some of the variables that was contributing to that, to those levels, and we realized that there are correlation between as per the LOI, which is the measure the TDSB use. A large number of parents were from lone parent homes. We look at the unemployment level, and we look at the median income. And, you know, we felt those were all factors contributing to the levels of achievement amongst amongst the students. The interesting thing is when this is juxtaposed to a place like Rosedale, the numbers are completely inversed. Those schools are all high achieving. The unemployment rate's almost zero. Police incarceration costs in Rexdale is $0. For Jane and Finch, it was 36, almost $37 million in 2008. So we're seeing this correlation between, poverty, academic attrition, and incarceration rate and violence. So the work that we're taking on is very important because we not only is addressing the fact around academic attrition, but it's also an issue around public safety, where we're urgently trying to end that vicious cycle that exists in these communities, where a disproportionate large number of these young people are in conflict with the law, or according to the law is in conflict with them. If you also look at police expenditure in Jane and Finch is 10 million more than most other jurisdictions. So you can see us trying to address pieces around achievement is extremely important. Just some background around YACE. We started YACE in 2007 as a way of building meaningful infrastructure and community. We felt one of the biggest issue was too many young people, too many youth, too many children, based on the fact that, we're talking single parent homes, we're talking parents working 2 jobs, long hours. Too many of those young people were left on their own device for way too long. So in a neighborhood, in a neighborhood that lack social infrastructure, that lack structured programming, that lacks the ability to micromanage the trajectory of a student or young people in any constructive way. The other option were the nuance reality of guns and gangs that was always prevalent, that was always there. The Toronto Star in 2012 deemed Jane and Finch the most dangerous place to be a child, and justifiably so. The Youth Crime Index documented that Jane and Finch has more youth gangs than any other community in this country. So if you think about it, if this community that has more youth gangs than anywhere else in Canada lack social infrastructure, lack programming, lack meaningful alternatives to guns, drugs, and mayhem, the outcome is obviously, it's inevitable. So the work that we're doing in the community, this research is important because we're trying to demonstrate that if we put meaningful infrastructure in place, if we address the gaps in academic achievement, we can't have students, we can't have 18% of students achieving at the provincial standard in math. I mean, those kids are going to go to Bay Street. It's obvious why we have this huge piece around incarceration in that community. So we're desperately trying to address that. So YACE's operational framework, it's outreach and wraparound. We simply find young people, find youth, find children, and provide them with comprehensive wraparound support. The arts, athletics, and expanded opportunities. It means that that's the structure for a program. The participants have access to stuff they would normally have access to because of cost, like structured, organized sports, the arts, programming, academic intervention and support. That speaks to what we're currently, the work that we're currently doing, making sure that, outside of the school hours, we can address achievement, and we can ensure we're not going to find out in grade 9 or grade 11 or grade 12 that a child is 4 or 5 grade levels where they're supposed to be. Our objective is to address those gaps early, in the evenings and on weekends. Civic engagement, making sure that, young people know that, students know that there's post-secondary, there's other options, so although your parent might not have attended university, you still can, and making sure they're well aware of those pathways and what those pathways look like. Public safety and youth violence prevention, that's a big aspect of our program at YACE. We work closely with the federal government, with the city of Toronto, and with the provincial government around not just writing, but putting up, documenting and assessing the practical application of gun gangs intervention strategies and how effective they are. Research and curriculum development is critical to us, because it's important that we create content that is reflective of students, and we can of those students, and we can identify and create frameworks that's consistent with their lived realities. And it segue into the piece around advocacy and reflective services, making sure that whatever it is that we create is not just the standardized way of doing things. It's reflective to them, who they are, and their unique needs. So that's YACE's operational framework in a nutshell.
Okay.
Right.
So now that you've heard a little bit about the history and demographics of Jane and Finch and the inception of YACE, I'd like to briefly tell you about our partner, Spirit of Math. Spirit of Math is a nonprofit organization that serves an impressive 11,000 students across 40 campuses and is located in more than 20 cities across the world. They've been operating for 35 years as an innovative leader in mathematics education, offering a unique curriculum and system of after-school math classes for high-performing and gifted students in kindergarten to grade 11. Just before we focus in on our research findings, I'd like to take the time to discuss key points of our data analysis. First, this research project was intentionally guided by tenets of critical race theory in education, given the demographics and our objectives. Throughout the project, we had regular team meetings with YACE, including the youth and parent advisors who were selected in consultation and recommended from YACE from the community. In June and July, we were busy collecting data from students and parent surveys, which we administered through Qualtrics. And during this time, we also conducted a focus group with 7 YACE's Ontario certified teachers to better understand the strengths and challenges of the community school initiative. The research team, which included me, Bryce, and Dr. Zadarat, then analyzed this data through codes and themes. So we had 3 overarching objectives, as Bryce has already mentioned, and for the most part, we relied on primary research from our surveys and focus groups, as well as secondary research from published literature, both peer-reviewed and from news and articles and other websites. And this was done intentionally because we didn't want to limit ourselves to peer-reviewed work only, because it takes time to get published and we wanted a diverse data set. We determined 5 overarching findings from our research project, and these will be discussed in more detail in the next few slides. But overall, first, during the term 2019 to 2020, the Community School Initiative was able to support the Jane and Finch community by addressing gaps caused by systemic barriers and circumstances created by or exaggerated because of COVID-19. Second, we found that reciprocal and meaningful partnerships between nonprofit and community organizations and private enterprises can increase access to social support programs and services. And here, alignment of community and school goals is important for considering students' academic success. 3, the achievement gap that is pervasively cited in the literature and in this demographics was minimized through mitigating the opportunity gap by focusing on accessibility and affordability of the structured program. 4, a dynamic team of caring adults, which included teachers, coaches, parents, and Spirit of Math staff, working collaboratively, which was the key here, optimized student achievement through identifying student and family needs and providing timely supports and appropriate interventions. And finally, and this is related to our 4th point, but trust, mentorship, and diverse representation that reflected the cultural identities of our students leads to higher student engagement. And related to this was the importance of socioculturally relevant and sustaining curriculum and pedagogies.
All right, thank you. So being mindful of time, we have about 15 minutes left because we do want to do some Q&A at the end. So we're going to selectively emphasize some of these themes and we'll put some sound bites from that came out of the focus groups and the survey responses. So these were kind of the themes we developed from the coding, which led to the findings.
Sorry, can I interrupt for 1 second? So we have a large number of people that's trying to get in that can't, and they're saying the password isn't working. can we assist them? Apparently the password, yeah. Can we help them?
Let me see. I'm not sure why it's not working. I'm gonna try resetting it on my end and see if I can put a new password on. Just a second.
Okay, thank you.
All right, sounds great. Thanks for pointing that out. So the 5 themes are here. We're going to go into detail a little bit for each of them and then try to wrap it up. So around holistic and culturally relevant programming, teachers expressed the partnership was really good, particularly helping students who were struggling in the regular school system, because it actually gave them that additional opportunity in an accessible way to improve, not just academically, but socially and emotionally. And we know COVID really pointed this out because mental health issues were on the rise, with remote learning and having to be able to home, not accessing, food programs, other programs that allowed for mentorship and being around a caring adult, right? Parents really expressed they benefited from this kind of community hub, family-centered approach to being part of the YACE program and culture. Especially the coaches being involved, because that added an extra layer of relationship building. Kind of the kids love sports, and now we're using this as a tool to also help them develop more academically through the community school initiative. But the key thing of being here is that programs like this exist, but are they affordable and accessible, particularly for racialized under-resourced communities? That's something we need to do a better job of on a systemic level. And this is what the Community School Initiative is doing. And our data is supporting that. It's helping mitigate systemic barriers, which is leading to students, particularly Black, Indigenous, people of color students, doing better. And these are just some sound bites from it, right? So YACE supports development of creating lasting relationships while building social skills and demonstrating the importance of respect. Public schools often does not provide this, especially in low-income, predominantly Black communities. That's from a parent and a student saying, I like that they are supportive and help with everything, sports, school, and character.
Okay, so many of the studies that we analyzed showed that structured after-school programming, such as the Community School Initiative and the math programs that were offered by Spirit of Math, can lead to positive educational, social, and developmental outcomes. And the results from the focus groups and surveys, the data collection we did, also showed signs that this programming has helped to mitigate gaps in learning that are caused by the pandemic. As Mr. Jones pointed out, the math scores of Black students are much lower on average than their peers. So programs like this are really important to prevent further academic separation along these demographic lines. Not everything was smooth. There were issues with access to technology, high-speed internet access, difficulty navigating digital applications, and different opinions on the structured curriculum Spirit of Math offered. But we feel like these are issues that can be solved with proper conversations and modifications between the different stakeholders. And next, we have a few sound bites. These are from parents and the students, just a few quotes. Many of the other parents and students also had the same thing to say about the Community School Initiative and the way that it offered services that the public schools were not offering. So they found that it benefited their children a lot. And then for the communication and parental engagement, the data we got was kind of conflicting. Parents felt like they were doing a good job with communicating with teachers. However, the teachers felt like this was one of the biggest barriers, was getting a proper line of communication. And we know parental engagement is complex, and there were many barriers, including lack of accessibility, limited time, accessibility to transportation was not always there, and other factors that would make engagement difficult. And the level of engagement needed for each student is subjective, but we know that parental engagement on students' educational achievement, learning, and social skills and behavior can be very beneficial. So we want to find ways and methods to increase this level of communication between teachers and parents. And then we have a couple more sound bites from there as well, just highlighting some of the difficulties that parents and teachers were having for different reasons. So we're trying to find a way to bridge that gap.
fourth theme was related to digital divide and inequality. And here we highlighted challenges from students, parents, and teachers about the barriers that were exaggerated because of COVID-19. And we just found that overall teachers were reporting difficulties with adequate access to technologies and internet, and parents with study spaces, devices, or resources to support their children at home. And we just wanted to note the high number of parents and students who reported in-person learning over remote learning, so 63% and 72% respectively. And here are some key sound bites. And our final theme is related to effective pedagogies. And here we just noted that the presence of coaches was helpful in increased engagement, especially in remote contexts. So for example, when coaches were present in the virtual space, student cameras were turned on more often. There was greater student participation in online activities. And parents also reported and agreed that coaches were critical in increasing student engagement. Teachers also had to shift sometimes from intrinsic and extrinsic motivation to engage students remotely, as well as alternating between using a combination of individual work and friendly competition more frequently to maximize student engagement. And then we also have some sound bites for this theme. And this one just highlighted from a parent.
I think this is a good one to read out loud, Sally, so please.
For sure. The academic portion is just as, if not more important for obvious reasons. It reinforces that they are more than just athletes and regular public school students. It teaches them that they are able to accomplish difficult things if they try hard. And it shows them that they are valued, which encourages them to try harder.
All right, great. So kind of to bring it full circle, you know, the project is near completion. We've obviously launched a research blog to mobilize it. And it's not, as I said, not just about sharing findings, but creating conversations, connecting people with relevant resources. So if you check out the communitysschoolinitiative.com, there's a whole section on resources divided by stakeholders. We actually uploaded various literature reviews last night, and we're finally wrapping up the project with a one-day symposium, which will have some in-person components at 45 North Finch at Jane and Finch, as well as some remote. And more details will come out once the program is finalized, and that's a Saturday. So if you are available and would like to partake, we will update you with more information. And this is kind of to continue the conversations and to build on it. But the recommendations we're making based on the data analysis and the findings is we need greater investments to facilitate access to opportunities, particularly in a way that is affordable and accessible to racialized, under-resourced communities. And this is where there's a niche and a potential for intentional collaborative partnerships between the nonprofit sector, such as the YACE organization, and a for-profit organization such as Spirit of Math, where it's a win-win and you bring best practices together. I mean, this is nothing new. There's lots of literature on this, but we need to continue to invest and put pressure on our institutions to see the importance of culturally relevant and sustaining programming that reflects the diverse identities and lived experience of students, particularly BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, all right? Prioritizing relationships, right? Having coaches and teachers in the program that have connections to the neighborhood and understand those systemic challenges that the parents and the students have to experience is a big part of why YACE has a higher retention rate when it comes to its participants. Third recommendation is provide multiple avenues and measurement to help parents navigate educational platforms and support their children remotely. For example, when we first, the program shifted due to COVID to being fully online, there was a gap as parents and students were struggling to submit their work. So it's not that they weren't doing the work, but they actually had difficulties with the uploading part, which now delayed the students getting timely feedback to improve. Right, so this is why having user-friendly platforms that parents are able to access is important to avoid those challenges. So information letters, creating how-to videos, which is what was one of the solutions done, and more administrative support will help. Another way to do this is you can develop an information package on the curriculum and what they're learning, as well as how parents can support the children at home. And because a lot of parents didn't feel confident in math per se, but there's still ways from a relationship lens they can support the children and students. And lastly, just ongoing support of teachers and being cognizant of the importance of self-care, a little flexibility in pedagogy, assessment, and delivery, because we know with COVID, things went online, there's a short turnaround, and many teachers did feel overwhelmed navigating those challenges, as well as personal matters in their own lives. That would be opportunities for team teaching. This is also something that was done in the community school initiative, where one teacher would help out another teacher or help students who might have an individual education plan and identified exceptionalities. Also hiring additional staff to support high needs students. This is some of our selective references. As I said, if you check out the literature reviews posted, there's a lot more. And if you want to learn more, please check out the website, Community School Initiative. We want to thank the YACE funders who are helping minimize the opportunity gap, which is leading to greater achievement outcomes for racialized students from racialized under-resourced communities such as Jane and Finch. So Laidlaw Foundation, Spirit of Math, Ministry of Ed, Pinball Clemens Foundations, a big shout out and big ups to all of them, because there have been really great advocates and allies for the YACE organization, which has helped them grow tremendously since 2007 to now, where education and academics the big component of that. Thank you. I'll stop sharing and I'll pass it on to Sarah. You are muted.
Thank you. Can't get through a webinar without some tech glitches. Thank you so much, Sally, Devon, Bryce, Artavan. That was such a tremendous presentation. Wow, I'm just kind of taking it in terms of the work that all of you have been doing around making connections between poverty, racism, the school to prison pipeline, larger equity issues, and how to actually create meaningful change in the community. So really, really in awe of the work that you've been doing. We are going to open it up for questions and answers. The panelists will be providing the answers, and for this particular event, I'm going to invite folks to submit questions in the question box. You'll find it at the bottom of your screen. It's a little Q&A icon. In the meantime, what I'm going to ask, actually, I'll ask a question to get us started. I'm curious to hear from all of you about what's next. You alluded to this a little bit in the presentation, but yeah, what's next for all of you and your team?
Yeah, I think I'll let Devon take the lead, because there's a lot of new developments with a lot of the recent programs and funding coming, going back to the social inclusion framework. So Devon, go ahead.
Yeah, well, everything is predicated on funding, so we definitely want to continue the work that we started, and yeah, we want to launch the initiative again in the new year. What's amazing is the fact that a lot of the parents, a lot of the young people who was a part of this project, the consistent theme from parents are they're communicating how well their children are doing in math, and the great feedback they're getting from day school. So that's extremely, extremely positive and points to the fact of why we must continue with this very important initiative. But we're hoping to start in the new year. We're working our funding pieces out, and we're almost there. So we're hoping to continue. The folks at Spirit of Math, they've been extremely supportive. They're awesome. And so the folks at the ministry, Laidlaw, and the Pinball Clemens Foundation. So we're looking to start up again in the new year, and I'm confident that we will. Part of the issue was we were going through a process with space, and we have also secured a space starting in the new year, so we can definitely move ahead full throttle. So definitely looking to move this thing along.
And I would add that we're going to continue to document achievement with the participants, not just in the community school initiative. I think we're in discussions to see how we can kind of add that tracking piece to some of the other programs. There's some around youth violence prevention with the Ministry of Justice. And I think we know these things work, but a lot of times when YACE is applying, for example, for funding, is we know that people love quantitative data. And that's part of the culture we need to learn how to navigate, but also change, because we're talking about people's lives, and it's sometimes hard to put that in numbers, right? And so I think this is why it's important that we keep pushing, we keep being activists, we keep connecting with others who are allies in doing this work in the different sectors, and to kind of continue to try to get to the root causes of some of these issues versus having a punitive or a reactive approach, which is often happens. Right.
Thank you so much. Yeah, addressing those root causes are like absolutely central. Thank you. So we have a few questions from the audience. From Candace Stewart Smith asked, how can someone support this initiative being outside of the GTA?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first. I think, as I said, it's a little bit of an all hands on deck approach. It could be just making them aware of, bring them to the website, always looking for funding. A lot of programs are based on funding. The more ongoing and long-term, the better. You know, if you know key people in various stakeholders or levels of government, it could be monetary donation, it could be connecting us with people, it could be resources, it could be a donation. So really every little bit helps, and that all kind of, we're always trying to grow in different ways. So those would be some of my suggestions.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Artivan. You know, even to add on, even expertise, you know, people might have unique skill sets, and, you know, in, like, someone introduced me to this amazing math professor from York yesterday. Like, folks might have different expertise or different networks, or they might even want to come in and connect with some of these young people. I think for a lot of these kids in these neighborhoods, like, seeing is believing. So one thing we're trying to do at YACE is, you know, if for example, you have a background or you work in a particular field and your aspiration is to transition into that field later on, then we try to connect our program participants with those folks so they can mentor them along through that process. So there's a plethora of different ways folks can contribute, you know, whether it's come and support that program, financial support, networking connections, however, there's a plethora of different ways.
Thanks so much, Devon. And I should add, as wearing the CBR Canada hat, another way that folks can support is to come out to the event next week. You know, we'll be really kind of continuing these conversations and talking about how all these issues impact, you know, folks in the audience, and how we can kind of collectively take a response to some of the issues identified today around kind of equity and racial justice and educational opportunity for all. So we have a few more questions from the audience. From Evan Gravely, I'll read this question out. Thank you for an informative presentation. Will the full study results be published? I'm particularly interested, the question disappeared for me. I'm particularly interested in some of the program quality dimensions that underline observed success. So for example, curriculum structure, scaffolding, elements of an online environment conducive to learning. For context, Evan is working with a community education initiative in Hamilton, Ontario, to help with program development and evaluation. So they're very interested in best practices and the secret sauce of successful programs. So,
yeah, I think we're basically writing multiple articles right now as we're wrapping up the project. One of them is going to be in the Radical Teacher. There's a special issue coming out later on in 2022. So we're looking to mobilize the knowledge. There'll be a couple of articles kind of going a lot more detail into those themes, the 5 themes we discussed today. And as they're published, we have some other presentations coming up as well. We're going to post everything on the website, communitysschoolinitiative.com. And feel free to connect with me offline. I put my email in the chat if you want to further discuss, or we can find a room where maybe our interests intersect. So we're trying to post everything on that platform, resources, literature reviews, findings. So as things come out, we're going to upload them there.
Perfect.
And I'm also willing to share. I know the piece around the working community has been quite interesting, and we've had amazing people along the way to help. But I'm willing to share the operational framework at Yates that we spent over a decade creating. So I want to sit with especially young people that's in this work, that's in this sector, that's trying to make a change in community, that's working with difficult, marginalized, racialized communities. I'm willing to share the framework with folks because what we have created through trial and error, through research, through experiences, it makes sense. We know it makes sense. So I'm willing to share 100%. Just connect with me.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Devon, and so generous. All right, so I think we've got time for one more question. This is from Jim Larimore, and I'll read it out loud. Technology tools are scalable, but leaders who understand, have the trust of the community, are an essential and invaluable asset. What factors allowed you to collaborate so effectively, and how can others prepare to work effectively as collaborators?
It all depends. It all depends. Well, for us as Yates, we've been on the ground in community for a long time. So for example, Ardavan, who is leading this research, is a Yates alumni that came up through the programs, been around us since 2007. So, and through his network, he's able to pull Bryce and Sally into the equation. So you can see the piece around just traction and legacy and how it works. Like once you have established a reputation in community, and once you mentor and steward young people along, then they can speak to the efficacy of what you do, and even start helping you with this helping us with this very demanding work. So it's programmatic integrity, just being true to what you do, valuing young people every step of the way, doing it for all the right reasons, are factors that assist with your reputation in community. And once you have a good standing community, it's easy to have the brand out there. And I gotta say, for example, then you have entities like Spirit of Math that were awesome. I reached out to Kim and she was amazing. The team at Spirit of Math, they are amazing. They're hands-on, they're supportive. They're supportive with her teachers. And in some instances, you get lucky, to form some of these relationships. So it's just reaching out, connecting, and hope that people understand the work that you're doing and want to be a part of it. And the ministry is also helpful. The school boards are, helpful. So it's just networking and having folks understand the value in your work, and hoping that they can see the vision. And once they see the kids and the need, people for the most part are receptive to helping.
And I think I would just add, trust and intentionality are really big when you try to develop these partnerships. We want people who actually believe in the work. We know a lot of times organizations want their logo on something to be performative, to say, yeah, we're part of the movement and the change, without really investing in it. So we actually try to bring our partners into our programs. We invite them to come. It's like an open door policy, right? We don't say, wait till us give you a report. We say, come, spend a day with the coaches, spend a day with the kids, understand what they're really going through, that social emotional piece, to understand what do we actually mean when we say systemic barriers, not just some statistic on a paper you're reading, right? That's the difference for some of these kids, either going to jail or being shot or becoming doctors and lawyers. So I think it's really cultivating that. And that equity piece is big because a lot of times partners want to use that equality approach of, well, this is the way things are. But if we really want to change these social issues, we need alternative, radical solutions that are going to go maybe against your policy. So maybe we actually reinvent or revamp the policy versus trying to get the kids to fit the policy. And I think that's kind of goes back to the opportunity gap. And I saw the question by Stan Doylewood. Thanks for coming. And he's a professor at U of T. I think that speaks to that radical consciousness. Yes, we're trying to help the students, but also we need to actually change the system, which as a domino effect will help the students cultivate to their full potential.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an incredibly rich discussion. We are almost at time, so I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm also going to make sure we post the link here to the chat for the upcoming live discussion so we can continue this conversation. So just a moment as I do that. There we go. The event link is also on our website, and we'll send it out afterwards. So let me share my screen just a moment. And thank you, Ardavan, for posting those additional links in chat. Okay. So, wow, we are these webinars, always the time passes so quickly, and what a rich conversation at the end. Ardavan, when one of the things you had said earlier, and Devon, you followed up on this, was just like the importance of relationships in this work. I wrote down a line, I think Ardavan, and you had said, how do we build spaces that value relationships? I think this project speaks so well to the value and commitment around relationships, not just around relationships between academic and community partners, but relationships amongst folks at YAS, about all of these different connections, thinking about how do we work towards educational equity from the root cause up, and really honoring the strengths of communities. So just tremendous, tremendous work, everyone. Okay. So we hope that folks join us at the upcoming event on December 16th. We'll be continuing the conversation, and I already put the link in chat, and we'll send it out to folks as well later. This will be really an opportunity for us to continue the conversation. The live discussions are a lot of fun and all participant led. We'll make sure the webinar recording is posted online. I know there's a few people who weren't able to get in, so we'll definitely send that out to folks. And last, tell us what you think. We'd love to hear your feedbacks, and we'd love to have you come out at future events. So thank you so much. We are at time, but we hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and we look forward to seeing folks next week on December 16th at 12 p.m. EST. Thank you again to Sally, Ardavan, Devon, Bryce. What a wonderful presentation. Yeah, so tremendous. We're so delighted that you could spend and share some time with us today.
And thank you for helping hold the space for these conversations. That's just as important, I think. So thank you.
Thank you. And please come out on December 16th. It'll be a great event. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.